Well, howdy, everyone, wherever you happen to be on this fine day. I would like to introduce myself. I am Michael Hingson, your host here on Unstoppable Mindset podcast. And today we have as a guest Iuri Melo, who is a Utah resident, and he is going to talk about all sorts of stuff. He's got five children, and he is married to Katie, and he has been in the therapy and other works for the past 20 plus years and has done a lot to really work with school children. And he's going to talk about a program that he helped begin back in 2017, I believe it was. So we'll not give anything away because it's more fun to let him do it. So, Iuri, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset.
Michael, I am ready. We're going to be unstoppable today. I have a feeling. I'm ready to go down any one of those roads that you're just discussing, including some other new ones that I'm sure you and I are going to carve through today. So let's
Well,
do it.
I want to start with something in your bio. You refer to the fact that you have been an LCSW for 20 years. LCSW stands for,
A licensed clinical social worker. So
that's
when
what
you
I
go to
thought.
school, yeah, and you get your master's in social work, then you still have to do some work and some licensure. And when you get about 4,000 hours and 2 years into it, hopefully, and you pass the test, right? You got to
Yeah.
pass the test. Then you kind of get that licensure piece, and that really allows you to then do kind of the individual work. And I have to say, it's been a good experience for me. I definitely has been a blessing for myself and my family. So, and it's just helped me to meet and to get into the nitty-gritty of people's lives, thousands of people's lives, and I'm just so grateful for that, to be a part of that.
Well, let's start a little bit. Tell us about kind of the early Yuri growing up and all that.
Oh,
That's always a
sure.
fun
So
place to start, at the beginning, as it were.
man, let's go all the way back to the Genesis. So I actually was
Sure.
it's kind of an interesting story. I don't know a whole lot about it because I was very young, but I was actually born in Mozambique, Africa, as back when it was a Portuguese colony. And then at the age of one, which of course I don't recall, but I moved to Portugal and grew up there until I was about the age of 15. And then came to America, right? Like the just like an immigrant story. And I moved to Provo, Utah. My sister was attending Brigham Young University at the time, and I didn't have a whole lot going on for me by then. My parents had kind of divorced, and my mom suggested, hey, why don't you go to America? I think there's just more opportunity there, and I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. I came and finished up high school, then went to college, then did some kind of humanitarian religious service, which we've talked about before too, Michael, and then went on and stayed with school, got my bachelor's, my master's, and here we are, right? 20
Right.
years later, married, five kids, just taking life as it comes.
Well, and we talked about it a little bit, and I thought it might be worth asking. So you did missionary work for the LDS Church for 2 years. Tell us a little bit about that and how that affected you.
Mike, that was so meaningful for me. I just have to say, in fact, I was just reading an article the other day, specifically about boys, and I think it was talking specifically about how boys kind of have a tendency, or maybe for a little while, they've been lagging behind just a lot of metrics specifically to young women, right? Who seem to be just succeeding kind of in academic areas, and a lot of them are more engaging more in academic or higher education than boys are. And I think a lot of that discussion was about how young men are struggling, like young men are struggling to kind of progress, and I feel like for me, when I engaged in that experience, it was such a meaningful experience. And my guess is that a lot of listeners don't know, but
Yeah.
basically you're kind of assigned to an area, right? And you go to that area, and there you get to live with other missionaries and you engage in service. I mean, it could be religious service, it could be other types of service, but really you just end up meeting and talking to thousands of people from all walks of life. And that was such a coming of age experience for me. I feel like I left there with just a confidence that I didn't have before that really kind of catapulted me forward into my life and into my relationship. So it's amazing that I'm going to be 50 this year, Michael. And that was when I was 20 years old when I did that. And it's amazing that that experience still has so much sway and influence in my life, but it does. It was really a positive thing for me.
Where were you assigned? Where did you go?
I went to beautiful New Jersey and I served in the lower half of that, all the way from kind of New Brunswick, North Brunswick, all the way down to Cape May and to Trenton and Camden. And oh my gosh, I have such
You
fabulous
traveled all
memories
over. You
there.
did.
I did. Yeah. Which is kind of what you do. You kind of, go through all sorts of areas, which is just so fabulous. But I got to see just some absolutely gorgeous places in Jersey, and also some places where there's some really challenging poverty. I
Yeah.
just got to see and be a part of all of that in those communities. It's really an enriching, deep, rich opportunity. So really grateful for that.
Yeah, and I think that's the advantage of it when you can truly go and experience it and experience something that's different than what you normally experience or do. It has to enhance, I would think, your view of the world and certainly how you picture things. And I think that's so important that you had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I agree. It was truly transformative. And I would even say, especially as I've gone into the field of psychology, I would definitely say that that 2 year experience um, was really formative, I think, in my ability to make that decision into the future. It certainly created additional abilities and skills, and definitely created some additional compassion and understanding in me. Um, so it was good for me. I hope it's been good for others. And but like I said, there's so many cool opportunities that people can engage in. So, but thanks
So
for
you
asking me about that. Yeah.
well, you went and did that work. You came back and you went to college. Well, you
Yeah.
must have gone to college because you had to get a
Yep.
master's degree along the way.
That's right. Yeah. I did. I jumped right back into college, was motivated to do that, performed better than I had before, which was great too. So that kind of service time was really good for me. I think it matured me quite a bit. And I jumped right back into it, finished up my associates, got my bachelor's and then my master's. So it was a good thing for me to do.
What'd you get your bachelor's degree in?
I got my bachelor's in psychology. I got my
Okay.
in psychology with a minor in sociology, and then gratefully was accepted into the University of Utah and finished up my master's of social work there.
Wow. So you've been
Yeah.
in essentially the social sciences, psychology, and social work your whole career.
Yes, I have. I have. That was kind of one of the decisions I made is once I kind of decided to go down that road, I wanted to get as much experience as I could,
Mm-hmm.
even working wise. I worked with like foster care agencies. I worked in group homes. I worked in hospitals as a social worker and a care center as a medical social worker. So I got a little bit of experience, or even in emergency rooms as well as a social worker there. So I got a little bit of a nice and extensive history in that field. And but for the past 20 years, it's really been in private practice uh, that I've really kind of done my work. And then, of course, the last 7 with SchoolPulse and kind of
Mm-hmm.
starting up that service as well.
What drew you to go into therapy and do what you're doing?
That was my final internship when I was finishing up school. I was kind of in charge of finding an internship for myself, and I tried to pursue something that would pay me a little bit. Uh, and so I actually met up with who became a good friend of mine, was a local therapist here who said that he would take me on and let me do an internship there. And sure enough, I did. And so when I finished my internship and finished my year, he basically offered me a position, said, "Hey, why don't you stay here and help me to run this private practice? And you can do kind of the substance abuse and you can work with kids," which were some areas that he kind of was hoping not to do. He wanted to transition and to do other work. And I was doing that actually at the same time that I was doing medical social work at a local care center. And then as I built my clientele in the private world, I just stayed. And definitely the money was better, especially once, I was kind of able to go on my own and build my own practice. Um, and so that's kind of how I got into private practice. And once I started, I pretty much stayed in.
Yeah.
Um, Been pretty good.
The rest is history, as they
The
say.
rest is history, as they say.
So you, so for the last 20 years, you've been in private practice. Why did you decide to go out on your own?
Specifically with private practice, I mean, this is kind of a pretty usual arrangement. Like when you're, being interned or you're working for somebody else's practice, right? We kind of have a financial arrangement, right? Where I was
Hmm.
giving a share of my profits to that individual. And at some point, I tried to renegotiate that, right? I wanted to kind of take less, right? Or make more, right? And at that point, my good friend, who's still a good friend to this day, said, "Hey, I think it's time for you to go on your own." And I did. I kind of bit the bullet, gave that a try, and it was pretty spooky.
I'll bet.
Um, but
You hadn't thought about it.
no, I hadn't really thought about that. I just kind of wanted to renegotiate. And so I ended up doing that. And then later on partnered up with a few other people and really had a nice, thriving practice with multiple therapists and interns and even some nurse practitioners there who were doing some psychiatry there. Um, and all of that kind of slowed down once I began School Pulse 7 years ago. And right now, I've really got kind of just a small little private practice that I work in the afternoons, and where I kind of do my private work. And then the other half of the day, I spend trying to build this program and to promote it throughout the country.
Well, tell us about Pulse. You've mentioned it now a few times. So
Yeah.
tell us kind of what School Pulse is all about.
You bet. We started that about 7 years ago. We actually had kind of a surge of student suicides here in 2017, where we lost about 7 kids in our community to suicide. And a good friend of mine, who's a principal, whom I really respect, and I knew at that time, reached out to me. Felt like all he really had at his disposal were just reactive tools, and so what he wanted to do was to find a way to be more proactive, to be more engaging, and to really prevent suicide instead of just kind of passively waiting and then intervening once things have occurred. And that was really the genesis. That was the beginning. That's where we started. And we started by creating this program that would proactively engage students via text and then to provide some feedback back. And we've grown now over the past 7 years where we now have an entire team of individuals that we proactively engage students via text. We've created these incredible videos and activities that promote evidence-based positive psychology, growth mindset, and cognitive strategies to students. Our goal is to protect students, to give them or to feed them or to nurture them with the kinds of things that will insulate and protect them from student suicide, from depression and anxiety, and ultimately to help them to perform and to succeed in school as well. And so we provide text-based support. We have these email campaigns that go out to parents and to students, and then we provide schools with a suite of services that help to promote student success and, of course, to prevent student suicide and other behavioral issues that they deal at the school. So we've kind of become this, what in schools or districts they call a multi-tier solution. And that's really what we try to promote or give to schools is we want to come in to the rescue. We know they're overwhelmed. We know that students have a ton of needs, that they can't meet all those needs, and we want to come in and immediately provide a solution for them to address those problems and address those issues in a way that's not burdensome to them. So,
Well, why have there been so many teenage suicides?
interestingly enough, the CDC has, put out some date or some data specifically about that. And over the past few years, I mean, in fact, even our Surgeon General, I don't think he's actually our Surgeon General right now, but Vivek Murdoch suggested that the youth mental health crisis was the defining crisis of our time. And so all of these metrics, right, all the way from student anxiety to students feeling hopeless or persistently sad, or students who are having suicidal ideation or attempting suicide and completing suicide, those numbers all seem to be trending in the wrong direction. Um, as far as to why that is, Michael, I would imagine that there's more than one variable. There's a book that I'm sure you may be familiar with, probably your listeners are familiar with as well. It's a book called The Anxious Generation. I think he has some pretty compelling data and information there. And he talks about two particular factors that I think are interesting. One, of course, is the kind of the meteoric rise of technology and cell phones in particular, not just specific to social media, but phones as a whole.
Hmm.
And then I think he actually talks about parents particularly. He feels that we've become overly protective of our children, and in a sense, we're preaching fear more than we're preaching confidence, like and courage, right? So that's something that I constantly tell people is send your kids out into the world with confidence, confidence that they can succeed, but also that when they fail or when they go through difficult times, like that we're going to somehow find a way to synthesize those experiences and for our good, right? For our profit. And so those are some of the solutions or some of the things that I think have been mentioned as significant factors to that kind of youth mental health crisis that you're talking about.
Well, so today we see more instances where students, especially girls, but I think probably all, but especially girls, are taken, they're kidnapped, and so on. And so parents naturally want to monitor them closer, but that has its own problems, as you're pointing out. How do you deal with that?
You know, interestingly enough, and I don't have that data before me, I think those things are more visible. But I think what I would actually say is in regards to that, and I think I'm kind of quoting Martin Seligman, who's kind of the father of positive psychology, is when it comes to where our communities are, we're actually safer than we've probably ever been. Like, and I think so all of those things I think that you've just mentioned have all actually kind of tracked down. They are more visible, and I think as a result, parents have become a little bit more protective. But the actual data suggests that it's all been going down. We're actually safer than we've ever been, even though I think those things are more visible now than they've ever been from the past. So,
Well, the
yeah.
problem is, of course, in part that the media, when something does happen, they make a big deal out of it. And that helps to create a lot of the fear that I think people experience.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think obviously the availability, right? I mean, the fact that this is plastered everywhere. And in fact, when I'm talking to people who struggle, for example, with like an anxiety disorder, one of the things that I always tell them is you need to find a way to manage your input. Like, and when I say input, I just mean the
Hmm.
information that you have coming in. Because if we're constantly putting in the information that's creating that anxiety inside of us, like that's where we're going to live from, is from a place of fear instead of a place of courage and confidence, which I think is where we ought to be coming from. But, and so if somebody, right, feels like they have those tendencies, right, to kind of be anxious or to worry a lot or to worship their worries, I always tell them, look, you need to manage your input. You need to manage the information that you're taking in and make sure that you're at least combating that, right, with some kind of optimistic uh, and confidence building type language so that you're not just being driven by fear. We cannot be driven by fear. Like that's like one of my goals. Like fear cannot be driving the car. Fear can be a passenger, but it cannot be driving the car. And oftentimes when I see people in therapy, that's exactly what's going on. Fear is making their decisions for them instead of their goals, their objectives, their dreams, the things that they want to pursue, and the things that are of value. And so Yeah, we ought to. I hope we can be teach. I hope we can teach that to our kids.
I hope that we can teach it to our parents as well. I know that one of the
Yeah,
things that,
agreed.
yeah, one of the things that I decided to do when the pandemic began was to write a book about fear. And in part that happened because in on September 11th, I learned that we don't control everything. In fact, we don't control most things. And in fact, was given a message as I was running from Tower 2. I heard a voice in my head that said, "Don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on running with Roselle, and the rest will take care of itself." And I had this sense that if I and my guide dog worked together, which is really something that most people miss because they just think the dog does everything and the blind guy just tags along, which is just not true.
Yeah.
But if we worked together, we would be fine. Well, we were fine. And so when I started to work on Live Like a Guide Dog when the pandemic began, and the whole idea was to use the lessons I had learned from 8 guide dogs and my wife's service dog to actually help people learn about fear and learn that mostly fear is always about trying to worry about all the things over which we have absolutely no control, which is well more than 90% of all the things we worry about. And so we don't just worry about the things over which we really influence. That doesn't mean you're not aware of the other things, but you don't have to fear them because you don't have control over them. And all you can do is worry about the things over which you have control. And so I hear what you're saying and I understand it and I agree with it that so many people are just so fearful of so many things. And yeah, social media and other things don't help, but still ultimately people need to learn for themselves that they have to focus just on the things over which they really have an influence and use the rest of what they experience as a vehicle to help them focus to deal with what they can.
Michael, that's absolutely brilliant. That's so inspiring. And I know you've told me a little bit about that. That's just fabulous. It actually reminds me, and I'm sure that your listeners are probably familiar with the 7 habits of
Highly
highly
effective
effective
people.
people.
Right.
Yeah. But I think Stephen Covey talks about that very principle. He talks about the kind of our circle of control and our circle of concern, right? And if you can kind of imagine, right, there's these two circles, right? It's kind of a smaller one in the middle and then a bigger one around that one. And that circle of control is what you've just described, right? Is our ability, right, to influence things. And influence is such a key word
Mm-hmm.
because it's not control, right? It's not our ability to control things, our ability to influence things, but also to be aware, like you said, right, of that circle of concern, right, which is, composed of what other people think, what they're doing, their opinions, right? In fact, have you ever heard of the book by Byron Katie called Loving What Is? Um, Man, that's a good book. But anyway, she has a principle in there that I think you would enjoy. She said, there are three kinds of business in this world. There's God's business, other people's business, and your business. And she talks about, how God's business is, in a sense, like, I mean, she's not necessarily referring to God as this like heavenly father or heavenly being, but she's saying God as in God's business is just what happens around you, right? They're just
Mm-hmm.
events or accidents or circumstances that happen around you. Of course, other people's business, right, is what they do. It's what they think. It's their opinions. It's the things that matter to them. And of course, your business is what you're doing. And so her concept, right, is take care of your business. Like stop being in God's business. Stop being in other people's business because when you're in those businesses, you're not in your own business. And so
Yeah.
I've always kind of liked that idea of minding your business, right? Not in a narcissistic or like I'm the only person in the world type of thing, but learning how to take care of your business and being in that place where you can have maximum impact and influence but not getting caught up in that fallacy of control, right? Where we end up not only creating a ton of anxiety for ourselves, but it really just having incorrect expectations of ourselves and the world around us.
Well, I remember when the World Trade Center events happened and for so long afterward, um, I realized along the way that we didn't have control over and we didn't have any influence over the events of September 11th actually happening. And I don't think I have yet to see a single piece of evidence that tells me that even if the entire United States government worked together, which they should do more of anyway, but if they had
Yeah,
worked together, that they would have been able to predict and stop September 11th from happening. But what we each and every one of us, getting back to God's business, other people's business, and your business, getting back to that concept, what was true and is true is while we didn't have any influence and couldn't have influence over the events actually occurring, we have total influence and control over how we deal with it. And I've seen so many instances where people go after the Muslim church, they go after one thing or another, they say these people are bad. And the reality is, this wasn't a religious thing. This was just a group of thugs who decided that they wanted to have their own way. And unfortunately, they functioned very well as a team and kept it quiet, which is why we couldn't figure it out. But the bottom line is, we have control over how we deal with it. And I met one gentleman who had been a fireman up to and including September 11th. And then he decided that he wanted to become a police officer because his brother had been an officer and killed on September 11th, and he wanted to go after all those terrorists and kill them, which is not a very positive reason for becoming a police officer. And that kind of hatred doesn't help. And I think that it's very important that we really need to look at why we do the things that we do and that we do them
sure.
for the right reasons. There's a group of people called business continuity people. They're in the business continuity industry. They describe themselves, as, according to one person who I met from the group, called the what if people. They're always analyzing, well, what if this happens? What do we need to do to react to keep the business going? What if this happens? But what I noticed in talking with them, and I was at one of their conferences and delivered a speech in London last year about it, one of the things I noticed is they don't do it out of fear. They do it because they know that they can keep businesses going, but they're not doing it out of fear. They're focusing on what if for a different reason. And that's the thing that I think that we need to do more of collectively as humans is do it for the right reason and let fear help focus you, but don't let it overwhelm or blind you.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I've heard that that the message of fear is prepare, right? And
Yep.
so I think I like that idea, right? That you can take, what could potentially be, right, kind of what ifing ourselves to death, right? Where we're kind of just or catastrophizing all the potential bad. But what you're describing, right, is a very intentional look at the what ifs in order to prepare or to find some solutions to some of the problems that could arise. And so I think that that's the key, right? Is sometimes I'll describe our emotions or even fear as kind of like the lights on a dashboard, right, on a car, right? When you kind of get your oil light is blinking or your engine light comes on or your tire is low. And that means something, right? There's a message to that. And so I think that's exactly what we can do is we can see if we can identify like what's the message here? Or perhaps an even more important question is like, what can I do, right, to address this in a positive way? What do I need to
Yeah.
do to address the problem? And so sometimes when we ask a better question, we'll get better results, we'll get better answers. And so, whereas when we ask all the wrong questions, we're going to get crappy, we're going to
Right.
get crappy responses. So,
This is hard to resist, so I won't. Did you ever watch the TV show The Big Bang Theory?
oh my gosh, I think I've seen maybe one or two episodes, but I never got into it. Should I get into it, Michael?
Oh, it's fun. It's funny.
Okay, I'll have
Well,
to do it.
so Penny, one of the women on the show, had a car, and her check engine light was on for 15 or 13 years while the show was on. So I'm not sure that the check engine light means anything because she never had a problem with it. Just saying.
I love that. I love that.
No, I hear what you're saying. And I think it's so important that people need to step back. We need to become more introspective and we need to start to do more work to understand why we're afraid because then we can work on fixing that problem. But no one, people can advise us, but we have to do the work ourselves.
We do. And even going back to one of the statements that you made just a few minutes ago, Michael, in regards to like our ability to respond, right? Or to kind of, in a sense, I feel like we're these meaning making machines, right? And I'm reminded of Viktor Frankl's book Man's Search for Meaning, which
Yeah.
as a listener, if you haven't had a chance to listen or to read that book, I would just highly recommend it.
Yeah.
That's like it's like a top five for me. It's really solid. But there's kind of this wonderful quote in there where he says, between stimulus and response, right? Between what happens to us and what we do with it, right? And our response is this space. And in that space is our ability to choose our response. And in our ability to choose our response lies our freedom and our happiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what that space is, right? Is not just to choose what that response will be, but I would even say that in that space is our ability to choose what that event actually means, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, like I tend to kind of subscribe to this concept of, cognitive or cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Which is the idea that the way that we perceive the events in our lives matters more than the events themselves. And so our ability to have these belief systems or ideas are really key, are great long-term solutions that really impact your mood and well-being. In fact, sometimes I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Inception, Michael, but it's
Mm-hmm.
one of my absolute favorite movies. I love that movie. Um, and at the beginning of that movie, you kind of have this idea of extraction, which is the individuals in this movie would go into people's dreams, go into their mind through their dreams, and their purpose was to steal secrets, right, from people's minds. But then the movie kind of changes gears a little bit from the extraction of an idea or an extraction of a secret to inception, right? Or planting an idea inside someone's mind, an idea so powerful that it would fundamentally change that person. And so I always like to kind of optimistically or maybe even idealistically think that there are ideas that we can plant inside of our minds um, that are so powerful that they can positively transform us. And I absolutely believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I find that as a therapist, that's definitely one of those things that I'm constantly looking to do is sometimes extract, right, some of those ideas that are running unconsciously inside of us that are just, they're no longer of service. They're not effective. They don't help us. And then, of course, is planting the kinds of ideas and belief systems that will help someone to live an extraordinary life because they have an extraordinary mindset.
And in reality, I believe we have all the answers. That is, we know what to do. We know how to make that happen, or we should, but we ignore it. We don't listen to our inner voices. We don't listen to and observe so many things that go on around us that we again just allow fear to take over and overwhelm us, which really doesn't help and doesn't serve us in very good stead at all. Tell me a little bit more about School Pulse. How
Yeah.
does it work? Why is it so successful? What do you do?
Well, I don't know if I mean, it's successful because we're able to intervene directly with students. So I'll kind of explain it with maybe a little bit of a backstory.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so I think schools and I've been indirectly involved with schools now for 7 years. I don't presume to be an educator myself, but I have had the privilege of just meeting the most extraordinary superintendents, principals, administrators, school counselors, school social workers, and school psychologists. So I feel like I've learned a lot over the past 7 years. And I think one of the things that schools really want to do, right, is, and schools kind of have to do this, they have to provide services to all students, right? And one of the things that schools right now have to do is they have to provide some sort of, whether it's curriculum or initiatives that are meant to prevent student suicide and to improve student wellness, right? And so that's really where School Pulse comes in. What we want to be for schools is that systemic solution, right? And there's that great quote, which I'm sure you realized or that you'll remember, Michael, which is, we don't rise to the level of our goals or objectives. We tend to fall to the level of our systems, right?
Hmm.
Because sometimes systems just aren't in place to make something be sustainable. And what we really want to do is we want to come into schools and provide them with a sustainable solution to all students. And we do that in a variety of ways. So, for example, like one of the first things that I tell schools to do the moment that we walk into a school is let's begin our once a week email campaign to every single parent and every single student. Our video, we deliver one video a week. That those are our student success videos that are just packed to the brim with evidence-based positive psychology, growth mindset strategies, and other cognitive strategies that have been proven not only to protect children from suicide and other disorders and other problems, but also to improve student success, student persistence, student wellness, student happiness. And that's really a core principle of positive psychology is the realization that success revolves around happiness and not the other way around, right? It's kind of this Copernican revolution, right? Where we sometimes think that happiness revolves around success, but it's actually the other way around.
Hmm.
Happiness is a huge advantage for people. And so our goal is we want to deliver in a non-spammy way, in a very informational way, the best content available to parents and to students to help them to be successful, to help them to engage in their school culture, to help them to better and improve their relationships, and to help them to succeed academically, of course, which is what schools are there to do anyways. And so we do that through our email campaigns that schools can begin immediately. We provide them with the most comprehensive mental health resource for teens in the country. Truly, truly. And I know that that can sound a little cliche, like, really, Iuri, is it really the most comprehensive and the best? And the answer to that, Michael, is absolutely yes. We have created that. We give that to every school. We also provide schools with our live text-based support. Just imagine having a student come into your office, right? Maybe they're struggling, they're failing in school, or they're having issues with their grades, or maybe they're having some suicidal ideation or struggling with substance abuse, or maybe their parents are divorcing. And as a counselor or an administrator, you say, man, I want to provide this kid with some support, right? And you can opt that student in to our amazing text-based support. And you've literally, at the click of a button, you've just given that student this tool that will be with them all year long through the holidays, through the summer months, proactively engaging them twice a week over text. And then anytime that that student engages, they're going to engage with a live team of people, not artificial intelligence, but a live team of people that will be available to them after school through the holidays. It's incredible. So we want to provide real tools to schools that don't create more work for them, that actually are relieving work from them. And so we've really worked hard. We've really tried to listen, really, to
Hmm.
schools. We've tried to listen to them. Like, what are your problems? What issues are you having? Where are you overwhelmed? And then let us come in and come to the rescue and provide you with real solutions that relieve your struggle and your overwhelm.
What are some examples, if you can relatively easily do it? What are some examples,
Exactly.
for example, of texts?
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
what are some examples of texts that you might send to a student that help them with that?
I love it. So every Tuesday we deliver our brand new student success activities. So for example, the one that just went out today, we always try to make our student success activities match the time of the year. Obviously, it's the beginning of the school year for most people. So the text that just or the activity, the video that just went out this last Tuesday was how to become a better student or how do I get to be a better student, right? And so we just released this text, right? It has our little video image and it just has a little question about like, hey, have you ever thought about or how do you become a better student or what things are you doing right now to help you to be a better student? And it just has the link. The kids can click on the link. It immediately opens the video and the kids can watch it. And then on Fridays, we do a variety of things. We send out other inspirational and engaging content. For example, we might share that quote. We might share the quote that just says, hey, do you know that positive relationships multiply your joys and divide your sorrows? Or, we might share that quote by Viktor Frankl, or we might or we might share another quote, let's say by Winston Churchill, that maybe says, like, your failures aren't fatal, your success isn't final, right? And this idea that we can just keep trying and trying and trying and trying. And we try to always release texts that are engaging, that are trying to engage the students, because when
Hmm.
they engage back, they're going to get a live person that's enthusiastic, that's grateful, and that has a ton of resources available to them to give to those kids. But man, we have seen some incredible success, Michael. I mean, just all the things that you can imagine, all the way from students who are themselves struggling maybe with suicidal ideation, or whose parents have gone through a divorce, or who have lost a loved one, or maybe who are suicidal themselves, or who are self-harming, or maybe who are having some homicidal ideation. And they share that with us, and we're able to intervene. And we just have some truly like Nobel Prize winning type experiences with students who tell us where they're maybe struggling or they're dealing with physical or sexual or emotional abuse, and we're able to intervene and help those students. It's just absolutely phenomenal.
Do you oftentimes use stories to help people relate?
Sometimes, I mean, so
Hmm.
that's one of the beauties, right, of having real people answer real texts is they can relate, right? They can talk to them about their own struggles, their own challenges in high school and middle school, right? And they can connect individually with their students. But ultimately, of course, our goal is we want to make sure that we're interested in them. We're asking them questions. We want to make sure that we're seeking to understand first, right? And then certainly providing them or matching them or meeting them where they are, which really just means with our own experience, right? With our own stories,
So
which
when you're
make us
engaged,
human.
so when you're engaging students, you may very well ask them questions because you've got live people who want to really get to know them.
That's exactly right. We have kind of an acronym, and I won't spend the time to kind of tell you what each letter of it means, but there's kind of 6 or 7 key areas that kind of govern our conversation or the way that we speak to people. Uh, And the first 6 are really all relationship building strategies where we
Hmm.
greet students with enthusiasm. We thank them for being there. We match them. We ask them questions. We seek to understand. And then only at the end, right, do we offer suggestions or provide
Hmm.
some advice with permission. But really, the key is helping students to feel a sense that they're being heard, that it's safe, that they're being understood. And only then do we then provide, with some ideas or some suggestions that they could try on their own. So and of course, and I will just say this because this is important. I want to make sure that people understand that we're not attempting to be a solution unto ourselves. Really, what I mean by that is our goal is always to connect those students to their networks where they are. Like we realize that the most important factor for that student's well-being, their happiness in the short and long term, are positive relationships where they are. So our goal is always to connect students to their parents, to their guardians, to the professionals at the school, and to other local resources. That's what we want to build for them because we know that that's the ultimate protective factor.
Yeah. I would suspect that sometimes some of your team gets into some pretty heavy discussions.
They can. I mean,
Yeah.
we have students who come to us, right, with I want to tell you that about 80 to 85% of our engagement in interactions with students are of a positive nature, which is actually important too, because we
Yeah.
want, by talking about the positive, we enhance it, right? But obviously we have, 15 to 20% of our conversations are at times students who are struggling, right?
Yeah.
All the way from just very basic things. I had a fight with my friend, or I just failed my test, or I'm stressed out, or I'm tired, or I'm not sleeping well, like you said, all the way to um, them reporting physical or sexual
Yeah.
abuse and us just caring for them and then connecting them with the help so that
Hmm.
they can get right help right there where they are.
Yeah. And that's really the issue. And ultimately, all you can do is, well, it's not as simple as saying be supportive, but all you can do really is to be there, to listen, to guide. Um, but students ultimately have to take some steps on their own at your direction.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, that's kind of our triage, right? Is always, I mean, one of the first questions that our team will ask a student who comes to us is always, are your parents aware? Have you spoken to them? Do they know about this? Would you be
Yeah.
willing to speak to them? Right? We want to forge that. We want to strengthen that. And then if that's not a possibility, or if they choose to not do that, then our next movement, our next scale, right, is we look to connect those wonderful students to the professionals at the school, which usually
Mm-hmm.
means a school counselor,
Counselor.
school
Yeah.
social worker, one of their administrators, who then kind of help to make that transition, honestly, back to the parents. But that's really what we want to do. Like I said, we're not arrogant. We're born on humility. We're not the ultimate solution or the final solution. We're part of that, and
You're
we're
key.
really honored. Yeah, we're really honored to be part of that.
So I assume that as part of what you're doing, you're also working to train the schools, train the staff to be more connected to deal with more of these solutions and to understand hopefully more of what's going on with their students as well.
We are. I think, and I think this is kind of a key part, and I'll just share it as my own personal opinion. Um, I really feel like I'm thinking about I'm like universities like Yale, Harvard, Stanford. I mean, even like BYU, or I'm sure other colleges or universities throughout the country. And some of the most, if not the most popular classes on campus have to do with wellness, student wellness, the science of happiness. My goal, honestly, Michael, is why are we not doing this in high school? Like, why are we not teaching these valuable concepts that not only protect our kids, right? Which is really where I want to aim our focus is on building the protective factors for our children instead of just being enamored and hypnotized by the risk factors or the diagnostic side of things. And so that's really what I'm hoping to bring to schools is this incredible dose and injection of positive and growth mindset strategies that help students to succeed academically, socially, in their relationships, in their life, physically, emotionally, spiritually, etc. Like that is the goal. That's where I feel like my opinion is that's where school should be doing more, is
Mm-hmm.
more of that proactive and preventative measure instead of this overly focus on suicide, which of course is important. And I want to prevent suicide. My opinion is that I think we'd be doing a better job of preventing suicide by leaning on and fortifying the protective factors of children instead of just focusing on the risk factors.
Right. And I hear what you're saying and I understand it and I agree. I think it's so much more important and there's so many reasons to do that. And hopefully more people will catch on to it, including parents,
for
because
sure.
parents have to learn to interact with their students in a different way than a lot of parents tend to do today. So,
And that's one of the things that we do, right? Is part of
right,
our email campaigns are meant to go out to parents. And we do that for two reasons. Number one, because I'm a parent myself. I've got 5 kids. Like I think it's fabulous, like that we want to be completely transparent and share the very best that we have with those parents so that they have some fabulous resources to use with their own children. That's one. And then, of course, the other one, well, I've already kind of mentioned it, right, is the idea that we're trying to develop them and at the same time also be respectful of parental rights and be
right,
totally transparent.
right. You have written 2 books, Mind Over Gray Matter and Know Thy Selfie. Tell me about those.
Oh man, those were like joyous times in my life. I'll tell you just a brief little story. I won't take too long, I promise. But
That's okay.
Mind Over Gray Matter was the first book that I wrote, and it's really kind of geared more towards adults. But I want to say that I was maybe 13, maybe 14 years into my practice or so, and had always kind of thought of this idea of writing a book had kind of been percolating in my mind. My mom was a writer herself, um, just a beautiful poet, truly, like in my opinion, just immensely talented. And I think in some way, consciously or unconsciously, she kind of planted this little idea inside my mind to write, and I was always kind of intrigued by that. And so I had always kind of talked about this idea of writing and wanting to write. And my wife, honestly, God bless her, she challenged me. He said, "You just stop talking about it and do something about it." And I'm so grateful for her. And I think that that statement probably hurt and stung a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, it became a little bit of the driving force. And I mean, I would wake up, I kind of had a little bit of a routine. I would wake up about 5, I would write and edit and write and edit. And I did that for months and months and months and began to kind of build this project and put it together. And that's really what Mind Over Gray Matter was. It's kind of built on this idea that we can use our mind, our best thinking, our best self, basically to change the brain that sometimes acts from a really irrational or primitive place. And so I kind of try to make this distinction, right, between our brain, which is kind of the biological survivalistic organ that's kind of housed inside of our cranium, right, and our mind, right, which is our best thinking, um, and that we can kind of educate and train our brain to do those things that are of greatest worth and value. And so it's just filled with lots of ideas and fun chapters that are meant to just elevate one's perspective and one's mindset to really create an extraordinary mindset or extraordinary psychology. So, and then Know Thy Selfie was kind of that version, but written for teens. Like,
Mm.
so kind of writing things at that kind of more teenage language, but just really just some platitudes and some ideas on how to make their life better, um, and to just live deep and suck the marrow, right? Which is kind of one of my very favorite quotes by Henry David Thoreau, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want kids to do instead of just getting caught up in apathy and just ambivalence and not doing anything. So,
If you could go back and tell your younger self something about mindset, what would it be?
uh, I think as a young boy, um, was really fortunate. I feel like I just grew up in an extraordinary place with, I think, parents that really cared and loved me. I'm so grateful for my older brother and sister who really led the way for me. Um, but I dare say that some of my life, especially when I moved here to the United States, when I came to America, um, I think fear really held me back. Like
Mm.
fear of results or outcomes or being rejected. And I just didn't, I just I just didn't know enough. I didn't really think of the idea that rejection really just means next or a redirection, right? And so I think as a result, I really held back. I didn't try a lot of things. And so I have some regrets, which I think is absolutely fine. I think it's fine to have some regrets as I look back into my life. But I think that's one thing that I would say is I wish I would have lived a little bit more courageously. I wish I would have
Hmm.
been a little more proactive and engaged instead of passively kind of waiting for things to come to me. So I would have said, Yuri, like just send it, my friend. Like get out there, give it a go, try things out. Like go out there and fail spectacularly and figure that out, learn from that, and move on to the next thing and really build some skills that will become these renewable sources of joy and happiness for you and just go for it. And so that's what I would have said. I would have said to just stop shrinking, instead start rising up.
What's one common myth or mistake about therapy and psychology that you wish you could just totally eliminate?
I think thanks for asking that. That's a fun question. Probably one of the questions that I most asked as a clinician is, do you ever get kind of bogged down
Hmm.
by meeting with people and just hearing all the negative things about their life? And so I think that the assumption there, right, Michael, is that therapy is this kind of negative place, right, where we're just kind of commiserating or I'm just listening to people's problems and somehow it's burdening me and my soul. And I think my answer to people is, man, therapy is such an incredibly positive environment, at least with me. I mean, I guess I can't speak for
Yeah.
everybody else, but for me, it's never just about me absorbing, right? Like this receiver, like people's misery. It's taking some of those struggles at times, right? And learning how to synthesize those so that we can turn them towards benefits or how to move forward, or how to look for solutions. Like, so for me, therapy is this incredibly optimistic place where we're constantly looking to build and grow and develop and create and find a way to take the challenges of our life and consecrate them for our good, like to have them build us for our good. And so that's, I think, one of the misconceptions that I would love for people to realize is that, like, you're going to come to therapy and you're going to leave, I hope, relieved and feeling with a sense of hope from day one. Like, that's how you should be feeling when you leave that therapist's office.
Ultimately, you as a therapist can only you can give people a lot of information, but you have to do it in such a way that you show them that they have to adopt the answers for themselves. You can't force people to do that. And it's so exciting, I'm sure, when you see that happen.
It is, but I think that that's actually really important too, Michael, right? Is the recognition, right, that there is a clear and distinct line, right, between
Hmm.
myself and other people, right? And influence. We talked about that a little bit earlier,
Right.
right? Is I have to realize that. Like I have to realize that I'm here to invite, to present, to encourage, to assist, but then that people certainly have that ability and that's their business, right? Like that's their business. Their business is to choose whether to do or to follow or to be encouraged or not. And I think that that's for me, that's been helpful in my profession to keep myself, I suppose, happy and joyous with where I am, despite some of the choices of my clients. Like, is I truly respect them and I respect their ability to choose for themselves whether to do whatever I suggest or whatever things we come up together in therapy or whether not to. And I respect that. And I respect that that may be a long process for them and that there's a lot of story to be written and that things don't have to change according to my timeline.
Well, the other part about that is that the very fact that you project that kind of an attitude and help people see that it's up to them, and that you have, if you will, the line that you won't cross. Maybe that's not the way to put it, but
Sure.
you have a part that you play but they're really the main players. When you're able to project that and people understand it, that's got to be a cool thing.
It is, and my hope is that that'll do two things. Number one, I, I, I do. It's really important for me, I think, as a therapist, right? I don't want to speak to just be heard, right? Or
Right.
just for the sake of speaking. My goal, right, as a therapist, right, is I want to craft the message in a way and with the kind of tone and attitude, right, that it will make it more likely that it will be received, right? And so when I approach things with gentleness, with kindness, with compassion, right? Or even when I approach it with that kind of mentality of like, hey, here are a couple of ideas and you could take them or leave them. Like, and I love you either way, right? I actually find that that opens people and makes them
Mm-hmm.
more receptive to listening when it's not given from a place of constraint,
Right.
right? And so for me, that's really what it's about, right? Is I try to convey that attitude in part because I'm hoping that my words or my suggestions can be considered, not because I'm somehow communicating all the truth or capital T truth all the time, but I work really hard to try to provide, obviously things that could be meaningful and valuable for them.
As I said, you're conveying through attitude and through the way you behave something that people can react to, and hopefully they see it and they do it. Um, what are a few habits that you have adopted to help maintain your mindset every day?
Um, I've got a couple of things. And I'll speak spiritually here for a second. The practice of prayer and it and for you that might be contemplation, for you that might be meditation, for you that might be journaling, whatever that is. But without a doubt, I just have to say that I find that a lot of my days sometimes are spent with this kind of active conversation that's happening through prayer for me.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that has just been it's been something that actually my mind will turn to almost automatically now. I mean, it's been a long time. I'm almost 50 years old. I've been doing that for a long time,
Yeah.
but it's become a really significant part of my life. The other thing that I would say, and I kind of talked about kind of having, some activities, right, that kind of become these renewable sources of joy or happiness for me. And I really like those, whether it be like, playing the guitar or climbing or running with friends or doing these activities, especially if I can include them or include my family in it, that's like top notch, right? Because that's like the top or the peak of my life is to do those things with my family. But I would say doing those things um, and continuing to find ways to keep my mind, my body, my spirit growing. I just feel like I think we're made to evolve. Like I think everything in our bodies and minds screams evolution and progression. And when I believe that I'm growing and evolving, I'm happier for sure. And so for me, that's something really important as well as I feel like I have to be nurturing growth. And when I am, I find that there's energy inside of me. So that's an important key for me.
I'm with you. I know for me, prayer is a very important part of what I do, and for me, it isn't so much the praying, me saying, God, this is what I need, because God knows what I need. It's more me listening to get the answers, which
Yeah,
I think is so important.
I agree with you. I think that that's one area, Michael, that just speaking to you, I'll use you as my coach. I feel like I could do better there. I could do better there. I think allowing God or a little bit more time for that inspiration or potentially
Mm-hmm.
even revelation to come through. That's an area where I feel like I'm sometimes so rushed, right, that I maybe do a lot of talking there, kind of like what I've been doing in this episode, Michael,
That's okay.
and 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 maybe. I need to allow more of those times to just to listen. I think that would be a powerful practice that I think I need to maybe improve a little bit as well.
Well, if people want to reach out to you to learn about School Pulse or just interact with you in some way, and I don't know whether you're taking on too many
Sure.
additional clients, but how do they do that?
Yeah, I mean, so you can, for School Pulse specifically, you can go to our website at schoolpulse.org and you can reach out to me. You can see kind of what we're about. And I'll also provide some stuff for Michael if you want to add that to
Please.
like a link to those. If you want to reach out to me individually, you can just email me directly at Iuri, and my name is kind of strange. It's Iuri at schoolpulse.org. And you can just email me directly and let's chat. I'm happy to engage with you in wherever state you're in. So um, I'd love to help.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you for all of this today, and I want to thank all of you for being here with us. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you find it helpful and that you'll reach out to Iuri because I am sure that School Pulse will help your kids, and I'm sure that he's got lots of wisdom that he would be very happy to share. So please reach out to him. I'd love to hear what you think about today's episode. Please email me at michaelhi@accessibe.com. That's michaelhi at accessibe.com. And please, wherever you are, give us a 5-star rating for the podcast episode today. It's valuable. We love your feedback. We love your thoughts, and I want to hear what you have to say. And for all of you, including you, Iuri, if you know anyone who ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, love to have an introduction. So please do that. But for now, I just want to thank you, Iuri. This has been great. I want to thank you for being here and for all the wisdom that you've imparted to us today.
You're very kind. I really appreciate you, Michael, and your searching questions. They were very good. I really appreciate that.